It being 6 p.m. on Wednesday, April 3rd, I will begin the Finance Committee meeting. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us here. And do I see? Yeah, we have one online. The first thing I'd like to do is introduce Jean Landis Norman, who called me concerning the Agricultural Commission budget. That was one of the ones we did the very first night we were doing budgets. I pointed out that the town administration had reduced the budget from $1,000 last year to $250 this year. I believe that was because going back, just using history, that's what they did for it. I also want to make the point that I had actually sent an email to Jean to let her know that it had been reduced by the town administration. We also talked about it here and we voted I am correct. You guys are looking at it, $250, right? We voted the $250. I'd also like to point out that the Finance Committee has not reduced or changed any budgets that were prepared by the town administration and presented to the Board of Selectmen. We have taken kind of a different approach this year. We've gone through everything, but we have approved everything that has been submitted. The one exception was the planning board, who went to the town administrator after the fact and said, hey, we're converting an employee from full-time to part-time. Therefore, you can reduce the budget X. So the town administration took it out of the master budget and we approved the lower amount when we reviewed that particular department. So with that, Jean, I will give you the floor.
Thank you, Carl. I appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. I'm here representing the Agricultural Commission. Our chairman, John Webble, is down for the count with COVID at the moment. As I suspect everyone has someone in their sphere that's suffering from COVID. I want to explain why we have not been utilizing the funding that's been approved. For several years, we had a $500 budget, and then the cost for the police detail for our annual agricultural fair, which we've done since 2008, exceeded the $500. So we asked for an increase to $1,000, hoping that that would cover a police detail as well as at least one paid program. Then COVID hit. Obviously, we weren't doing much during the COVID period. And last year, we did resume our agricultural fair. Only this time we were informed by the police chief that we would be required to have 2 police details, which would have exceeded our $1,000 budget. We told him, we didn't have the money to do that. He was very helpful in helping us to arrange to then have the fair on the front lawn of the townhouse. And it was extremely successful. We had several hundred people there, along with probably 30 vendors, some food trucks, and it went very well. And we didn't need any police details. This year, we're not sure where we're going to be able to do our agricultural fair. We're hoping that all the construction of the Veterans Memorial on the front lawn will be completed, and there'll be adequate space for us to still hold our agricultural fair. But not knowing whether or not that's true, we feel that we should have at least sufficient money in our budget to pay for at least 1 police detail, and if we're required, 2 police details. This year, we've also had some programs. We've tried to offer as many as possible that did not impact on the budget. We've had one of our members present a program on chickens because he's a local chicken grower. We also had a climate change presentation by a PhD candidate at Woods Hole. And because of his program, he was not allowed to receive any kind of payment for his presentation. We recently had the president of the Adirondack Forest Group come in and do a presentation on maple syrup. There was a $100 fee for that. We have another free program coming up on the 16th. Another one of our members is going to do a presentation on raising goats. And then at the end of the month, we're going to have a presentation by Blue Stem Natives on planting native plants, and that is going to cost us $250. We're hoping to do additional programming next year because each of our programs have been attended by 20 to 30 residents. And when you compare that to the 125 people that attend town meeting, we feel that that's a pretty decent attendance record. So I'm here asking that the Finance Committee and the administration please consider replacing the $250 with our original $1,000 request. And if there's sufficient funding, perhaps considering the $1,500, because if we have to have 2 police details for our next agricultural fair, that would pretty much wipe out the whole $1,500 with very little left for programming. So that's my spiel. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Jean. I will open it up to the members of the committee here for any comments or questions or thoughts.
I just want to say that though we've been approving budgets, we haven't been approving them without a lot of discussion.
Correct.
You know, we realize that expenses are bare bone, but we always talk about salaries. So with that being said, I didn't want it to think that we're just blessing everything. To me, increasing it by $750 isn't going to do any harm. So this is discussion. I'll just make a motion to increase the agricultural budget from $250 to $1,000.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Derek's and I. So we'll approve and recommend to the administration that they increase the budget from $250 to $1,000. 7-0.
Thank you very much, and I will relay that to the Finance Committee when they meet next week, or to the Agricultural Commission when they meet next week.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you again, Carl. I appreciate this opportunity.
Bye now.
Goodbye.
All right, the next item I'd like to take out of order because Tim Lewis, our chairman of the local school committee local school committee, is here to answer any of our questions and maybe to give us a brief presentation. I'm going to just give the guests here a copy of the sheet that I put together as kind of my summary that I'd like to do before we talk to Tim. This sheet that you're looking at is just my attempt to tell everybody how we got to where we are. The first column is nothing more than the, and for this pass, I'd just like to talk about the front page. We'll get to the rest of it later on. The first column is simply the FY24 budgets. The thing to note there is that the total education cost from FY23 to FY24 was a $1,866,000, 7% increase. The next column is the preliminary town budget, which is nothing more than where we always start our budget year off with an assumed 3% increase. The next column is the infamous March 14th joint school committee meeting where a lot of us attended. That at that time, the budgets that had been presented by both Silver Lake and the local schools was resulting in a $4,184,000 or 14.7% increase. You'll notice that eliminated the excess levy altogether, put us in a $500K deficit, which would have required a Proposition 2.5 override. At that meeting, the Silver Lake Regional School District voted adjustments of $1,605,000. The interesting thing there is $855,000 are in fact true reductions to the budget. The other $750K is really a revenue adjustment that's going to reduce the assessment to the towns. And that is being done with the idea that there's going to be significant the special ed reimbursements the next year that they will have to offset that. You'll notice that $1,605,000 gives, we got about $900K of it, going from the Silver Lake assessment of 17,628 to the 16,744. At that rate, without any adjustments to the local budget, we're looking at a $3,300,000 increase, or 11.6% increase. With that, let's skip to the last column. The last column was at that March 14th meeting. The couple of school committee members, regional school committee members, asked the town people, town government officials, what we thought was reasonable, what the town could live with. Being the only one from Kingston to speak up, I suggested that the target should be $1.5 million increase, or about 5% over the prior year. And you got to remember that everything that we're looking at now has to be looked at as a combination. You can't look at Silver Lake separately. You can't look at the local schools separately for this 1 year through, because there are so many reclassifications and adjustments. You have to put them together for them to make any sense. My rationale at the $1.5 million was to be at about a 5% increase. With that, the school administration did some more work with the numbers, and the long and short of it, they came to the local school committee meeting last night saying that the Kingston School Committee would have to make reductions of $1,888,000 in order to get Kingston to this $1,500,000 increase. I, for one, recognize that asking anybody to make almost a $2 million reduction out of a $15 million budget, and you can't read my comment at the bottom of that last column is impossible. So with that, I got together with some of the school committee members, and we discussed that, well, what might be more reasonable. So we came up with perhaps if we could get to $1 million to $1.2 million reduction, that would get the town budget into a more reasonable position. With that in mind, the Silver Lake administration, Jill and company, requested that the two local school principals come up with reductions. They presented reductions at last night's meeting of $1.1 million. And that was $388K of what I would call other reductions, and about $700K of staff reductions. The staff reductions that they were talking about was, I think, about 10 paras, 6 or 7 staff teachers, and 1 administration person, admin person. The school committee went through a lot of discussions. I want to give Tim here credit for really working the issue, providing leadership to point out that some serious reductions were needed. The school committee, the long and short of it, ended up voting the so-called non-staff, non-tier one reductions of $388,000. So that's the column that we're looking at right now, where I say with 388 local reductions. That brings the total education budget to the 31,313K for an increase of 2,912K or 10.3%. It leaves a very small excess levy capacity of $783,000. The finance committee will discuss this budget somewhat tonight. I'm not sure that we will finalize our recommendation, but that's how we got to where we are. I pointed out in the next column, if they had done the full $1.1 million reduction that the two schools came up with, we would have had an increase of $2,200,000 or 7.7%, leaving a excess levy capacity of $1.5 million, which your conservative finance committee finds more acceptable, although, not where we would really like to be. And our concern continues to be a 7% increase in FY24, almost $1 million of free cash provided to cover FY23 overruns, another 7.7% or 10% increase right now for the next budget. And we're real concerned that sustainability is not here when we're looking at budgets like this. So I think that's just my general way of trying to get the rest of the finance committee up to date with the work that I've been doing, working with the school committees and the administration, and recognizing where we are now. With that, Tim, I'd like you to, say general comments, whatever you'd like to say.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for your kind words for me. Last night was a challenging meeting. Tough decisions needed to be made. The committee did vote by a margin of 3-2 to reduce the budget by $388,000. There was a lot of discussion about the notion that Silver Lake had cut, Plimpton had cut, Halifax had cut, and that based on the sustainability concerns with the budget, that Kingston would need to cut. I shared in a public meeting that I thought the $1.1 million reductions, though, would be a challenge to overcome, but that the district could overcome it and allow the town to avoid financial concerns. But the budget did pass at reducing it at 388 opposed to the 1.1 million. And then the concern of some of the members at this point is the next steps. If it is not supported by this committee, and it's ultimately not supported by the Board of Selectmen, what happens on the floor of town meeting, and what are the options for the committee at that point if things are not passed in a smooth manner.
Okay, does anybody have any specific question of Tim? One question, I'll start out. One question I do have, Tim, is I've had two different school committee members make a comment about and throwing out a number of approximately $500,000 is an extra cost to Kingston because of the way we're doing the special ed going forward. And that confuses me a bit, because I thought that, we do special ed by body. And I guess it's maybe the proration that that the fact that some of that's going to be going through the assessment now, that may come into play. You may not be the best one to answer.
Yeah.
The principal. I know, because you've added the cost of the principal, which you didn't have to have before. The preschool.
But that's
Is that considered?
but that shares costs for Silver Lake. And it would not be $500,000.
Well, how does special ed work? Do we get
proportion of Kingston students, we pay 100% of that, or are we getting 58% of the overall?
Yeah, but, yeah.
It
well,
used to be the old way when? A year
last
ago,
prior to
last
this
year.
restructuring, yes.
Yeah, so should
However,
that
if,
be it?
if we have a student if we have a fourth grade student, who's out of district placed, the town of Kingston owns the cost for that student.
Right.
Once they leave the friendly confines of Kingston Public Schools and become a Silver Lake student, that now is a shared cost expense in the Silver Lake.
Will pay part of that kid's.
But conversely, Kingston would pay Halifax.
And that's where I get.
You're
the-
talking about the students from 7 to 12,
And
And-
pre-K,
pre-K. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
and it's not just 7 to 12, it's 7 to age 22. There's 18 to 22-year-olds.
But are the 18 to 22s considered Silver Lake, or are they owned by the local?
Silver
Okay,
Lake.
and this- okay.
Carl, can I make a comment or?
Certainly.
So the only thing I wanted to add, you guys, well, for anyone who doesn't know, I was on the school committee forever and then the regional school committee. One of the things that's tough is this year, what you guys did was a level service budget for all the town departments. Same thing went to the schools, but clearly everything completely went haywire, which it has done many times over the last 16 years. Many years ago, we separated special ed from regular day because we wanted to see schools had a 10% increase. But guess what? It was 12% increase of special ed, and we cut band, music, and art right out of the regular day. So everybody else got level service. Special ed got level service, but regular day has to make the cuts to make up for it. That's what's so hard. And this is a crazy couple of years for special ed. I mean, I've never seen it this bad. I don't know if part of that is because of the people who were at the hotel. I have no idea. And I don't know that anybody can even say because it's FERPA, but there are clearly some really bad funding formulas from the feds, the state, everybody else, and the taxpayers here in this town are really getting hammered with this. And unfortunately, making bigger cuts to regular day, they're not really making cuts because they're not replacing equipment that they're going to have to replace the year after or the year after the next. You guys have used free cash many years. Carl, you were always very creative in helping to make up for things that we had to cut. So and there's no guarantee that it's not going to happen again next year. I mean, the special ed, you cannot make cuts. So you can't cut the $2 million from the $15 million budget. You can only cut, they're being asked to cut 1.8 out of a $7 million budget, which is why it's impossible. So it's tough.
Okay, I hear you. And you're speaking from the educator's point of view.
I'm not speaking as a selectman, just
Right.
me.
But from an education point of view, we're speaking, what we as financial representatives of the town, we have a responsibility to do what we think from a going forward, a financial management point of
Correct.
view is a responsible thing to do. So that,
Right.
and you know me, I have spent 10 years now working with the schools, trying to come up with compromises where, everybody can get a piece of the pie and yet we can still continue to move on. So that we're continuing to do that. And I just am very concerned that maybe Kingston can afford to do a $5 million Proposition 2.5 override one of these years to cover these increasing education costs. But we're also going to be putting, $10 to $20 million on the books for new police station. At the same time, we want to do an addition to the fire station. I know the town's going to be spending, I'm estimating $5 million or more of its own money on roofs at the two school buildings here in town. So that when you bring all of these things together, there is some concern. If we end up living with the education budget that we have right now, we are adding $500 to every average home at tax bill in the town of Kingston. And the average tax bill, the average home is valued at $487,000. So if you have a home that's valued at $800,000, you're gonna be looking at an $900 tax bill increase. And a big piece of that is for the schools. The rest of our budget, we're not happy with that, but the rest of our budget is less than a 5% increase. And so when we're looking at a double that for the schools, we need to talk about it, and that's what we're doing.
If I may, can we get an estimate of what that budget, if we're looking at a large reduction, what we're looking at as far as class size changes? So there can be sort of a quantitative idea of, okay, if we're cutting X number of teachers, then class size is going to increase by 2.6 pupils or what have you, just so that there is sort of a quantifiable impact to the student there, or you know, are we losing art? Are we losing what have you?
Kyle, I can speak to that.
Yes, please.
Derek, so there was no proposed reductions of any of the specialists. And what I mean by that is your phys ed, your art, your music and technology. The big ticket cuts were a number of paraprofessionals, but let me get the number correct. 7 classroom teachers. So what that would look like if we went in KES, if we went from 8 classroom teachers to 7, it would reflect in the kindergarten from a classroom of 20 to roughly 22, 23. And in the first grade, we'd go from 20 to 21 students to 23 students. And in the soon to be second grade, you'd go from 22 to 25 students. Then when we go to KIS, see, KES has 8 classroom teachers, KIS has 7. So then you'd reduce, oh, look at that. So then you'd reduce from 7 classrooms to 6. Mr. Materna, the principal of KES, was not going to reduce a classroom teacher in the incoming grade 3 because those numbers are somewhat larger than the others. So that would remain with 7 teachers. However, if you were to go from 7 to 6 in grade 4, which would be the highest class size we'd see, and that would be go from 23 to 27.
All right. And, you know, one thing, and I know we do have teachers on the finance committee, but I will say that coming from a family of teachers, the guidance that they always have gone by is no more than 20 students in a classroom. So I have concerns that we're already over that as a school district, and I'll just end it there.
Thank you, Derek. Elaine.
Yeah, I just, to a lot of what Carl said, this year, do we see this as being the trend going forward? Because it's serious.
It is serious, and I'll acknowledge that I said in open meeting last night, I have concerns about sustainability, right? If this continues in the direction we're going, we're not going to be able to handle these increases. There is an increase in school age population. Hence last year, why we increased the number of teachers at KIS. I don't know where the census would put us moving forward for school age children, specifically entering K. But I can't speak to the population, but as Eric pointed out, special education law is written very particularly where once that dollar is committed, it is there unless the school district can demonstrate that the student is making effective progress and thus no longer needs the specially designed instruction. And that at the very least could take 3 years. At the very least.
So, but saying that, Eric, you talk about regular day kids taking the hit for special ed. But let's, as a finance committee, to take it up a level, the town residents, which is 14,000 of them, are going to end up taking the hit for maybe 1,500 students, 750 households. I mean, so that's the global picture we need to look at, because you have residents Of the 14,000, 4,000 of them are seniors. There's no alternative housing in town. There's no affordable housing. A 500 minimum to $1,000 hit. It's not sustainable. Serious conversations need to happen on how this is gonna
But here's the
turn
problem.
out.
And here's the problem, you know, and I didn't say anything last night. I was at the meeting last night. Wouldn't have gone over well in the room, right? But elections have consequences. Elections have consequences. The system is broken. It's broken at the federal level, down to the state level, and we're finally seeing it here locally. And we've been seeing it locally in other states. And people need to come to grips with it. And they either need to change their behavior or they're going to be paying, or they're going to be losing their houses. And that's the sad reality of the situation. And don't get me wrong, my wife's a teacher, right? Those classroom sizes aren't acceptable. I want them down closer to 20, right? But, you know, it's just madness. It's madness. The inflation, everything else, it's madness. And until people change, this is what they're going to get.
Well,
And we got to do the best we can with what we got, Elaine.
well, that's why it's a committee.
Okay, any other questions or comments from members of the committee? All right, the next thing I want to do on the schools here is I just want to get a flavor to let people know where we're standing. I'll lead off. As one member of this committee, I will not be recommending approval of the budget as it stands. I would be, I think it's a debate that we need to, if we decide as a committee we're not going to recommend it, then the next step is to work with the selectmen, well, with ourselves, to determine how we want to do it. One of the things that I've suggested almost automatic, if we're not going to recommend approval of the schools, then I would suggest that we would have, even if we just had the one budget article in the warrant, we would have it broken into two pieces. So that, you know, just like capital, you vote 6 or 8 line items, this budget item, you would vote town budgets, and then you would vote the school budgets. The second thing along those lines that I think we need to determine is, do we put in that budget what the school committee has approved without our approval or our recommendation of it, or do we reduce it to a level that we feel is reasonable and force an adjustment on town meeting floor if that's, you know, what it came to? Those things I just want you to think about. And at the same time, once we determine those things, then I want to work with the Board of Selectmen to see if we're in sync with them or if we're not. So that, you know, that it may be that the Finance Committee goes one direction and the Board of Selectmen goes another direction. But we'll work together to at least understand each other and figure out, you know, where we're going. So with that, all I'm really looking for now is an individual general feeling that, yes, I would support this budget no matter what, or no, I would not support this budget at this level. Mike, you're up.
And I think Mary a couple moments ago was hoping to add something. Would it be?
I have a question.
All right.
My question is, do we know where we stand with the collective bargaining agreements within the school district? Did they recently get negotiated? Are they going to be up for negotiation soon?
No, we're in year 1 of a 3-year contract.
Okay, so, and what did that contract look like? Because the impact of that is in here now. So what was that?
3%, 3%, 3%. For the teachers, that's bargaining A. Bargaining B, which is the paraprofessionals, theirs looks a little, it's not a percentage raise, it's a per hour raise.
Mhm.
And this is from memory, but it was a $1 and change per hour.
And with the class sizes that you were talking about a moment ago and with the the staffing cuts that the local school committee adopted, does that still keep a para in every single classroom, or do we now have classrooms without paras?
So let me back that up for a second. So last night, the school committee did not vote to reduce staff. Okay. If the school committee were to vote to reduce staff, there are dedicated paraprofessionals in our kindergarten classrooms. I do not believe the principal was going to remove them and reassign. I do not believe that, but that is at the principal's discretion. So when the school committee provides a budget for positions, it is at the discretion of the administrator to place them where he or she views most appropriate.
Okay. I guess I was trying to figure out whether with the increased class size, do we still have a teacher and a para in those classes that are seeing the larger increases?
But
No, and
right now, that's not on the table. They
But-
didn't approve any reduction.
But also, like in a general ed classroom, you don't typically have a fourth grade classroom teacher with an automatic paraprofessional. In most cases, in most school districts in the area, you have a dedicated classroom teacher, and you may have a paraprofessional who comes in for part of the day, or a special educator who comes in for part of the day. But it's not really a matter of practice in have a fourth or third grade teacher with a paraprofessional there full time.
And can I just ask one last question? So if the directive from the town to prepare the budget was a level services budget for all departments, is the school department's budget a level services budget, or do they have new additions in there, or we have no idea?
It's cut.
It's hard to say.
One thing I do want to add, Jean Ann said that the school committee did vote to reduce a reading specialist and 2 ELL positions from the 2025 budget. So there is a reduction in staff in there, even though it does not include the 11 paras and the 7 teachers.
Yeah, wait,
No,
so
they're-
can you say that again? I'm sorry.
The ELL is being funded through the emergency shelter
Correct.
for both schools. And what was the other one you mentioned? The reading specialist is
Yeah.
retiring and they're choosing not to replace her.
That retirement would take place in either the month of October or November. Mass teachers' retirements are predicated on your birthday. The teacher retires, and the recommendation was not to replace that position.
Mary, though, you were asking if there were new positions. Tim, didn't they asked for some new positions, but those were
Correct.
turned down.
Correct.
One of the things that does happen, though, that I think we're seeing the impact of that now, is that there are no new positions in the budget. But then I know in the presentation that Sarah gave us all, there's a list of new hires for special ed that I guess depending upon how many students come in, well, we had to hire 3 more paras. We had to hire this. So that added up to, I want to say, $400,000 or $500,000 of additions in the current year that automatically gets carried forward to next year. So, I asked the question, well, who authorizes that? I thought the budget authorizes everything like that. But I guess, again, I'm told with special education, it's different. If you have to add 3 paras and 1 behaviorist or whatever it is, that you do it. So.
And the principal was required by DESI, by the state. And again, an unfunded mandate requirement, no help.
So with all of those new positions internally, was the expectation that we were trying to keep more students in district? And so are we seeing a reduction in the out of district placements?
We did for 1 year.
Not at this time. But I will say, as a matter of principle and practice, schools have a strong desire to keep all kids learning in their community with same age peers. There are outlying cases where an out-of-district placement is required to ensure free and appropriate public education for that particular student. Those are team decisions that usually are lengthy discussions with families, with schools, with administration. But the ultimate goal of all educators is to keep kids in their community learning the same age groups.
And that there's a new special ed director who this year, and she came out and said it's her mission, you correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard in the meeting was to get more of these kids back into the district. And years ago, we created those programs in the middle school, I think, in DLC and TLC or something. And we did see more people coming back because it was programs that were offered in the district. So, but I think there's been some severe cases who've been sent out where school district just can't handle. You know, if you get somebody blind or deaf, there's special schools for them. But it seems like this year, and Tim, I don't know if you remember the numbers, but this year there were a lot of kids who had to go out of district that were not budgeted. And then for next year, she said something like 20 kids in the whole district.
It's a high number.
It's huge.
It's higher than the state average.
And we're
But
not allowed to cut those budgets, which
with
is
our, as Eric pointed out, our new special education director is extremely competent and she's goal oriented, and her experience speaks for itself. And she does have goals to bring children back to the community so that they can learn with their same age peers in the least restrictive environment. But as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to special education, there are your initial evaluations and then your reevaluations. So you initially evaluate a student, and I'm speaking in general terms, of course. You initially evaluate a student and you pick them up on, you provide an IEP for a disability in a particular category, and then over 3 years, you do a reevaluation. So earlier when I mentioned at the very least, it takes 3 years because the law is written that a student is provided said services for 3 years with goals and benchmarks, progress monitoring to ensure that that student is making adequate progress.
With all that said, I agree with Carl.
Agree with, I've said.
Everything Kyle says we agree with.
Pretty much
Hey,
the
Tim,
budget.
I noticed increase in transportation costs. Have we done a study to see if we can bring that in-house? Rather than,
There has not been a particular study for that. There's been thoughts and ideas of it, but there has not been official steps taken to provide that. The transportation, obviously, as you earlier, the cost of everything are rising, so the cost of transportation has gone up exponentially. If all our out-of-district placement students were in one particular building, in one particular placement, that would make transportation easier. It's just not. Placements are becoming harder and harder for out-of-district. We are not the only community dealing with it. We are above the state average, but we are not the only community dealing with this.
David, my recollection from having done this, and Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, is that there have in the not so distant past been attempts to look at what bringing transportation in-house would look like. And it always starts out at 1.5 the cost of existing structure, to say nothing of benefits, side perks, retirement, things like that, that it's not only is it not better, it would make the situation markedly worse.
But I think what we were looking at then, because Christine Healy did that just for all 4 districts, but I think that was just regular busing. Because there's no competition. There's per student, nobody else bids on our contracts. For that, the special ed transportation is different. I don't remember if she did the analysis on that, but that's even tougher. That's a lot of vehicles because it's could be one vehicle for one kid taken to one place.
Specialized equipment that we don't necessarily want to own to have a kid for 2 or 3 years.
But we're basically paying for it. We're just paying it outsourcing.
Okay, again, I just am trying to get a general sense so that we can give the school committees and the board of selectmen here an idea of where we're thinking of going. I'm not looking for a firm commitment of anybody. If they want to say, hey, they just don't know yet, we will be making a decision within 2 weeks. Next scheduled meeting is 2 weeks, and we're going to vote these budgets then for sure. Again, I am opposed to this level that I would not support this budget. Like,
Yeah, I'm hesitant to commit, mostly because I wasn't able to be there for all the presentation last night. I share most of your sentiments, and would be really reluctant to support that. I think the thing that I want to keep underscoring, because I know that Eric and Tim and some others have said this, is that if we're asking for a certain number of dollars to come out of that 14.5 number, the problem is you're not taking it evenly from all sections of the pie that 14.5 is made up of. There, I don't know what the number is, let's say 8 or 9 that's locked in stone, which means that for every dollar, every $100,000 we're asking in.
but for this discussion, I'd like to assume that that is the budget, that the local schools have voted their budget. Okay, they voted it as final. The regional has voted their budget. So without, without an atom bomb hitting, okay, I believe this is the budget that we're going to be looking at 2 weeks from now.
Okay, all I'm trying to underscore in kind of numerical terms is that I don't think it's quite as simple as looking at some of these percentages, because if we're asking for a 1 or a 2 or a 2.5% reduction, we're not quite doing that, because the special ed is going to be what it's going to be. And so 2% of the, let's say 40% of the budget that's regular day, we're now asking to cut regulated by 5%. If we go to 3%, we're now asking for more like an 8% reduction. That's the only thing that's giving me pause before saying a little more forcefully, we just can't do this.
Elaine,
I'm gonna say it's probably no surprise that even the general government budget, I probably wouldn't end up supporting, because that's higher than 3.5%. So if I'm not gonna support general government budget at 3.5%, I can't support a school budget at 10%. I mean, talking just from a financial perspective. I believe there needs to be some hard, serious conversations, unless somebody's gonna find some source of revenue within the next 6 months to pay for this. So, I mean, without revenue, there's no other alternative.
and I guess that the fact that you brought up revenue, I will also point out that these numbers are after state aid being increased somewhat. Our local revenue assumptions of things like ambulance fees and excise taxes have been increased somewhat. So if we had taken a more conservative approach on those other revenues, we'd be looking at a 12 to 13%.
And to add to that, I mean, it's no secret that the state revenue keeps decreasing every minute you turn around.
Right.
So, yes, I
Yeah.
did. So, I mean, there's no guarantee what we're gonna get for state aid. It's just, it's not a good position to be in, but
And we
Okay, I
can't
anticipate that schools with the revenue stream from the state, but schools will continue to decrease.
exactly. So,
A lot of the grants already come down.
I
Okay,
say no to
Deb, I
everything.
assume that what you were saying is that you are leaning towards not recommending approval of the budget at this level.
I mean, I sympathize and I know it's a unique situation, but as a taxpayer, you know, I could be looking close to $800 increase. So I'm
Okay, thank you. Jason?
I would not support the budget as presented. I think that we need to think about the seniors who already are facing inflation and other things. So I would like to see them continue to work towards more of the 1.1 reduction.
David?
No, no way.
All right.
However, we have to do something. Like, again, mark it on this day. Next year's gonna be even worse. It's gonna be even worse. Because the system is broken and no one's fixing it.
I hear you.
And, you know, I don't know what, we can't do anything really about it either, but we have to do something. So, you know, I don't know what to do about the class sizes, right? I'm not fully engaged in your numbers, or I'd really like to see the books, to be honest with you, more closely, but the class sizes can't go up And if I gotta live with this 10-3, then I gotta take it from somewhere else. And sadly, I think that's what we're gonna have to do. So whether it's from equipment, from somewhere else, I don't know. But it's gonna have to come from somewhere else.
Okay.
That's where I'm at.
Derek,
I would support the budget with the reductions that they have, the 300 plus reduction. I think the comment is that while it is egregious to have an increase of that level, we have not turned down any other budget that has had also egregious levels in salary increases. And I would argue that those increases in salary are probably higher than what we're looking at here if we just look at the salary line. And I know it's contentious, and I know I'm the odd one out on this. So let's move on to something we can all agree on, hopefully.
no problem,
Tonight,
Derek.
Derek.
That's what we want, is everybody's honest opinion. So in general, what I'm going to state is that the finance committee is leaning towards maybe on a 5-2 or 4-3 vote of not recommending approval of this budget at this level. And I'm talking just the education budget. Okay, does anybody else have anything specific for Tim? Tim, thank you for taking the time to come in. And again, I wish David and I were both there last night, and we can attest to the effort that Tim took trying to say, hey, I really believe we need more of an increase. But he had some members that were not going to budge from the 388K or, even consider a compromise. If you're trying to get 712K of, staff reductions, well, maybe you consider 400K, but no, that wasn't going to happen last night. So again, Tim, thank you for your leadership. You're doing well, I believe, for the town and the students in the school system.
Great. Thank you for your kind words. And thank you guys for the work you do. And we look forward to continuing to collaborate with you so that we can pass a fiscally responsible budget and still meet the needs of our students. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
What I'd like to do for the finance committee now is just rapidly go through this package that I gave you that had that sheet on the top. The next one is the typical summary of the budget that we always create. You'll see that, last year we had excess levy capacity of 2,888,000 in the middle of the top of the page. Right now, we're looking at 783K. Bottom line, we've gone from a $54 million budget to a $58 million budget. How much of that was schools? 3 million of it, round numbers, is schools, and 1 million of it is the rest of the town. I don't want to spend too much time on any of these sheets. Yeah, I'm giving them to you so you can study them on your own time. The next one is the tax rate analysis. This we can thank Carol that prepares some great analysis. This analysis would say that the average Kingston single-family home valued at $487,205 will have an increase of annual taxes of $480. And recognize that most of that is coming from the $3 million school budget increase that you just saw. The next page is the historical excess levy capacity. You'll notice that the last 2 years, we've really worked on being conservative, having some extra capacity. So we're going from 2,558,000 to 2,888,000 to 783,000. Okay. My humble opinion, a excess levy capacity of anything less than $1.5 million for a town the size of Kingston is not a good position to be in. The historical new growth. Here's where I always want to holler at every person who's looking to have 10% school budget increases, well, please, don't stand up and not want the commercial development that this town needs. Don't tell me that we can't put a business on Main Street because it's gonna create extra traffic. Don't tell me we can't build a, light industry factory out in the woods somewhere because it's going to hurt the turtles or it's gonna require us to cut down 6 trees. You can see that we had a couple of fairly decent years. 2023, we added new growth of almost $1 million. 24, we added $1.7 million. Right now, we're adding 575,000. And I suspect if we put 2026 up there, we'd have trouble getting to the 575,000 if we don't have something new come online sooner than later. Proposed sources and uses. This is, just trying to show that, where our taxes come from. For FY25, we're proposing 44,196,000, an increase of 3,726,000. That's 9.2%. So, order of magnitude, take your tax bill and multiply it by 9.2%, 1.09, and you'll be in the ballpark. Again, you see the uses. We have to put the local schools in Silver Lake together. There's your net of a $3 million increase. Townwide expenses, $1,130,000. I need to emphasize here that as much as we strive for 3.5%, I personally strive for 3.5% increases, 2.5% allowed by Proposition 2.5, 1% provided by new growth. Okay, well, that you can see that $1,129,000 is a 4.5% increase, and I suspect we'd probably be closer to 5% if we add some of the items in that don't go in at this stage, like the wage and personnel adjustments, that type of thing. And we have a nice pie chart on the last page that, Carol has reconciled the budget numbers, and we're again showing education, 31 million out of 59 million. We all know that education in most towns is going to be 50% or more of your local budget. The final page here, I asked Carol where we stand with free cash, that this becomes more important when we start looking at the capital expenditures and the warrant articles that are, coming out of that are going to be funded by free cash. You can see we started the year with 3.5 million. We're going to have used 2.5 of it. So we're going to end, if everything got approved, we'd be at a free cash balance after town meeting of $1 million. In my opinion, the $1 million of cash after town meeting is not a bad number. I'm fairly comfortable going forward with $1 million. The number that does bother me, and I think I talked about this at an earlier meeting, is the beginning free cash of 3.5 million. With 3.5 million, we just, in effect, we had more tax. We taxed the people more last year than we really should have, in my opinion. And I learned some of that from one of our visitors tonight, Mary McKinnon, when she used to sit in this chair and to talk about, where we stood on free cash and that type of thing. So that's, just my way of trying to get you up to date with the school budgets, how the school budgets fit in to the total budget package that we're looking at now and the status of where we are. Any further questions, comments on general on that?
But just looking at the free cash, the proposed free cash for FY25 is $1.3 million. Just looking at that chart here. And if everything gets approved at town meeting, we end up with 1 million. And I just looked at the leases that come up each year, and that's 750,000.
What they do is we're maintaining this so-called capital stabilization fund.
Right.
And so that's where the financing is coming for that. When we get to the, I'll give you advance, the capital, the balance right now is 773K. We're gonna put 100K in it on a warrant article to get to 873. Then we're gonna use 746 of it
Right.
for leases. So we end up with a balance of 127, which gets me back to what I have said at least 6 times in the last 2 years. We're not using the stabilization fund the way we intended it when we set it up. So to me, we ought to just do away with it and fund the capital the way we've always been funding it, through free cash.
Well, my point is that fund is funded by free cash.
Exactly.
So
And-
call it whatever fund you want. Free cash is $1 million, and it's coming 750s for leases that are going for 2, 3, 4 more years.
So if I could, Mr. I don't think that's quite accurate. There's a specific revenue that gets deposited, the meals tax gets deposited directly into the stabilization account as well. So the stabilization account has, for a number of years, paid for the leases that the town has entered into, and will continue to do that based on the recommendation of fiscal 25's capital, and we'll be able to maintain a positive balance moving forward.
I
for the
fully,
foreseeable future.
I fully understand that, and I fully agree with what you're saying. My point has always been, we've been taking in this 300, now maybe closer to 400,000 a year from the meals tax for a long time. And it used to be in a separate account that we would just use that to pay for part of the capital budget, and free cash would pay for the difference. And I guess
Right.
that's all I'm getting at is,
As well as me.
if the stabilization fund is a true stabilization fund, it's used in an emergency basis when you all of a sudden you have to go out and buy a $600,000 fire engine or a new ambulance, and you just write out the check from that account.
Mhm.
That's not happening. And I know Carol did an analysis that over a 5 or 10 year period, it's going to get built back up. And it is, I think one of the goals of the capital planning committee is to not continue to fund a lot of our capital with leases that just gets us into this, paying $700,000 for a lease. Okay. Anything else in general? Good. I'd like to move on to we have a last minute reserve fund transfer request. Does everybody have that? The IT department is looking for $9,170 to pay for a subscription license for, I assume that this is a new firewall security suite key that has to do with the fiber optic network that we've been installing in the last few months. The question is, we have the reserve balance is $26,676. They're looking for $9,170. So the balance would be $17,506. To me, we have a choice. We either approve this and reduce the balance to 17.5, or we send them back and say, charge it to, where your account is. Looks like they have 12,000 in the account. When you overrun that in April, May, or June, talk about moving between, transferring between accounts in June and so. But I don't feel strongly. I think I've said it in the last couple of, reserve transfer requests. I just as soon use up the money and I don't have to listen to people begging for the reserve fund transfer. But I want, the rest of the committee to tell me what they want to do.
I tend to agree with you on that, Carl.
Thank you, Derek.
See, I agree on things.
No problem.
Has this been has that amount been put into the IT budget for next year as well? Or are we gonna need to revote that?
We could do that. I'm excited. Mike will need to do that.
So we dropped that from 90 to 60 already. Looking at the right line item.
Any other questions or comments?
I mean, as unpleasant as it is, some sort of cyber attack is pretty much the last thing we need.
I move that the finance committee recommend approval of the reserve fund transfer for the IT department for $9,170.
Second,
Carl in favor.
Michael, aye.
Elaine, I.
Tippy, I.
Jason, I.
David,
Derek, I.
Yeah, Derek, sorry. Muted myself.
700. Finance committee approves that transfer request. Meeting minutes, let's get that out of the way. Has everybody looked at the meeting minutes? I have a few minor changes that I'll give you, Rhonda. We have meeting minutes for February 21, March 6th, March 20th. I'm asking us to do this now because at the end of the last meeting, I was so anxious to just adjourn, we didn't do them.
I can move to approve them.
Okay, we have
Second.
For which one date?
All of them.
all three of them. We're gonna approve all three of them at once. February 21, March 6th, March 20th.
I wasn't here the 21st.
yeah, I think we gotta go one by one for
Yeah.
abstentions.
Just, I could, Mr. Chair, if you have significant changes, you should make them before you approve them.
Yeah.
We will,
Sorry.
the motion is modified to say that the approving the minutes with the minor adjustments as suggested by Mr. Pike. You accept that?
Yeah, are they're just little changes.
Yes.
I'm fine with that. I wasn't here on the 21st, so
Yeah.
can I vote on that?
Yeah, we gotta.
We'll
vote
vote
on
them separately.
Okay,
We just had a motion to vote the February 21 minutes. We've had it seconded. Carl in favor.
Michael, aye.
Abstain.
Jason, I.
Elaine, I.
Debbie abstain.
I'm abstaining. Derek abstains, sorry.
403. Motion on the March 6th minutes. I move that we approve the March 6th minutes with minor modifications as suggested by Mr. Pike.
Second.
Carl, I.
Michael, abstain.
David,
Elaine, I.
Jason, I.
Debbie, I.
Derek,
601, March 6th minutes. March 20th minutes.
We'll move approval, subject to any minor edits made by Mr. Pike.
Second.
Carl, I.
Michael, aye.
David,
Elaine, I.
Jason,
Debbie, I.
Derek,
Get that count? I wasn't listening. Thank you.
7-0.
700. Okay, so I think the last item on the agenda here for us to start our review of the town meeting warrants. Articles. Has everybody had a chance to at least look at the draft of the articles? What I'd like to do is to go through, what's that?
Which
You got
draft?
several
Oh.
drafts. The final draft?
A lot of these, I think we'll find that there haven't been any changes. But I will speak enough to make sure you're looking at the right draft. Okay? Is there a problem?
Carol, message, a question.
Carol?
Is it, Carol, is it possible to discuss adding $10K to the IT budget software license tonight?
Look, let's leave that alone for tonight. Town administrator's whispering in my ear. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so what I would like to do here is go through as many of these articles as we can. What time is it now? 7:15. Go through as many of these articles as we can and actually vote them. Now, I'm going to suggest some articles that we may want to defer it until the meeting 2 weeks from tonight, like the budget, for instance. What I will do is say, hey, here's my recommendation, and please speak up if you think that, hey, number one, the finance committee does not need to vote this article, period. And number two, if you want more information, you choose to defer it, and I haven't given you that opportunity. Fair enough?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
And if I'm losing my voice, I'm gonna let somebody else take charge of discussing these.
Has that ever happened before?
Only when I go home and Article 1, prior year's bills. I think we all remember that, this article is a standard article, and a few nickel and dime invoices for one reason or another will come in so late, or they don't get approved, or they don't get processed or something. So this year, Carol has 3 invoices here for a total of $2,903.60 that she has to get paid. And we're going to use unexpended articles to fund those payments. Does anybody have any questions?
What is the annual hosting fee?
Carol, do you know what that is?
Just curious. Oh, can't hear you.
No.
Well, the annual hosting fee, there was an expense that the clerk incurred as part of the 2023 town meeting for the screen that was needed to provide those who may be hard of hearing the ability to read the conversation or the debate on town meeting floor, the screen and the individuals who were providing the service.
Okay, I'm fine.
And I just want to add, these are in their operating budgets now, right? I mean, there's no,
I move the finance committee recommend favorable action on it for them.
A second.
All in favor? Aye,
Aye.
Cal.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Elaine, I.
Jason,
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
Recommend approval 7-0-0. Article 2, close the Smart Growth Stabilization Fund. What this refers to is many, many years ago, back in 2007, the town was going to do one of these smart growth projects over by the transfer station, I think it was. And we received a $6,000 grant from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We never did the, development, and the 600,000 has been sitting in a bank account ever since. Carol came to me a couple of years ago and said that, you know, we ought to give these funds back, and I made the comment, why? If they're sitting in the account making interest.
They're not asking for them.
So the, you know, the right thing to do now is to return the funds. It's, you know, what, 17 years later. So all this is doing is giving the authorization to do that.
Will the finance committee recommend favorable action on to?
Second.
All in favor, Carl, I.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Elaine, I.
Jason,
Eric,
Um,
aye.
maybe I.
Recommend approval 700. Supplemental, town departmental budgets. This, I assume, is a case where we don't, and we anticipate that we're not gonna be able to cover these costs by the end of the year via transfers or something. So we're asking to fund it from free cash.
Yep, free cash.
Oh, yeah, okay. Free cash, 50,000, 35,000. Fire department overtime, we did the same thing last year. We, maybe that came out of the reserve fund, but there was a $30,000 late adjustment last year for overtime. And I, for one, am tired of saying yes to everything. So I'm going to vote against this. Now, I open it up for questions and comments.
Is the veterans, that eventually gets returned to us, at least in some part?
75%.
Okay. What is chapter 111F leave?
So we've had a handful of firefighters who have been injured on duty.
Okay.
And because of that, we've had to fill those unexpected with overtime, which is what the request is for.
I'm looking at again, I'm big on free cash. I mean, we're paying for everything with free cash. The unexpended articles, I'm fine with that. I mean, it's a good use of the articles. But with everything's free cash, so I'm with you, Cal.
But it's free.
Yeah, it's the 3.4 million that taxpayers didn't get.
I mean, it's already been expended, right? The medical and the overtime, or it's been
We,
accrued,
So-
so it's.
we anticipate with the injuries that, some of it hasn't been. If the fire chief was to not receive the supplemental appropriations, we would not go overtime shifts and not be able to respond to as many calls for service with fewer shifts.
Why? This isn't gonna be authorized until July 1st. So why does it have any impact on what the shifts are?
It'll be authorized. It'll be authorized.
It's this year.
Well, okay, May 11th, yeah. And so we're almost there.
Mhm.
And the other thing is that I looked at is that last year we provided $30,000, and then we had a return of more than 30,000 from that department. So, yeah. Again, one of my reasons is to say no. So that's, like it or not.
Do you anticipate funds being able to be transferred between departments in May and June?
So I guess the short answer, yes. I think that the budget this fiscal year is going to be exceptionally tight. So I don't know that we're going to have $85,000 thanks to four items, plus whatever else we may get. I understand the concern that FinCom has. My concern moving forward is, and the fire chief has said this to this committee in the past, is he's gonna, if there's a he bases his overtime budget on past history and what he expects for people who are on vacation and sick time, things of that nature. The injuries are something he can't plan for. It wasn't included in his overtime budget. So my concern moving forward is he's going to increase his overtime budget to address the risk of somebody being injured and having to pay overtime or something over and above the normal vacation sick.
And we're also hiring 4 new firefighters so that we won't have to have as much coverage for overtime and sick time and vacation time.
Are they in this year's budget?
Yes,
So when I look at the free cash, I don't see the 35.
For 6 months. So the firefighters were hired January 1st.
Okay.
Of 24. So they're funded for 6 months in fiscal 24, and funded for the full year of fiscal.
So by, having whoever out on injured leave, there's still extra bodies that wouldn't have been there last year.
I would say no. The reason I would say no is we've hired 4 firefighters. There are 4 different shifts, so 4 different crews. So there's a new firefighter for each of the 4 separate staffing groups that they have. So if a firefighter was out for whatever reason, they would be down to whatever their service level or funding or
Minimum
staffing
staffing,
levels were, excuse me, through December 31st of last year. That makes sense. So they have 1 extra guy on, they have an additional person on duty now. They've increased the staffing level by 1 person per shift. If they go down, if 1 person is out, and the chief doesn't fill that shift, then there will be at the same number of people on shift that they were prior to the full firefighters being out.
Can I suggest that this one be funded to the 17th?
certainly. Make a motion.
I move that we table further discussion of Article 3 until our next meeting.
I second it.
All in favor?
Michael, I.
David, I.
Elaine, I.
Jason,
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
All opposed? Carl, aye. We'll defer this on a 6-1 vote. The next one is to Article 4 supplemental FY 24 wastewater enterprise fund. We're asking to transfer 601,000 from unexpended town meeting articles to cover some overruns for this fiscal year. Elaine, with your other hat on, do you agree with this transfer?
I can step off the table and talk about it if you want.
Yes, please.
Okay, basically what it is, generally speaking, we had $100,000 mechanical error in a water meter read that we thought we were getting $100,000 more in revenue than we actually gonna get. So there's 100 right there. We had today some of the betterments we got notified that should have been billed in December, I guess on the January bills. Weren't billed, so we had a deficit in that area. We're trying to work through that since we just found the numbers. And by not having the 4th tank online at the plant, that 4th tank debt needs to be paid until we have the 4th tank with customers. As long as projects aren't going forward in town, we don't have customers to pay for the 4th tank. So,
And are these articles that are funding it, are they from the wastewater enterprise fund?
yes,
Okay.
right now, we unexpended articles, we have about, I believe it's 1,500,000 or 1,700,000.
Okay, so all of this transaction is within the wastewater enterprise fund,
Yes.
so, I don't have any problems with it.
And the money amount may vary, so I don't know if you want to wait. I mean, like I said, once we figure out this whole veterans that weren't billed, that number, I would imagine, will come down. So,
I'm gonna recommend the finance committee, move the finance committee recommend favorable action on this article, and we have to play around.
I'll second that. All in favor? Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Jason,
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
And I assume we have Elaine recusing herself. So it's 6-0-1.
To get you an actual path of the conflict between.
The next article, Article 5, is a CPC article. I assume that it's separate because this was a very late request that the well has failed at the Opachinski Athletic Complex. And so the Recreation Department has gone to the CPC to get a $92,000 funding to replace the well. I wasn't at that CPC meeting, so I'm not sure exactly what went on, but I think it's pretty straightforward that it's CPC money being used to fund a well at the Opachinski.
And just for transparency, it's in a separate article by itself with a fiscal 24 date on it. So if it were to be approved, on May 11th, it will allow the recreation department to expend those funds prior to July 1st, to try to get those wells in as quickly as possible.
Okay.
and just a question, is this not gonna be included in their maintenance schedule going forward, trying to?
They've had a maintenance schedule all along. They're using, yes, so the short answer is yes.
I move the finance committee recommend favorable action on Article 5.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Elaine, I.
Jason,
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
Well, voted recommend approval 7-0-0. Article 6, we will defer the operating budget until the 17th, whatever that next meeting is. Article 7 is the water department budget. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Move the finance committee recommend favorable action on Article 7.
Second, all in favor, Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
David, I.
I recuse myself.
Jason, I.
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
6-0-1, recommend approval. The water department request for eminent domain, I say that's not applicable to the finance committee. Anybody feel differently about that?
Well, I'll just go out there that without a well, there's probably won't be any future development in town because there's a water limitation. So to me, revenue growth.
Is this the same article?
Same.
We tried 3 times now?
Yes.
Yes.
Seriously?
But
Is that it?
if I could, right, and I respect, my opinion would be to jump too quickly to eminent domain in the past. My understanding is now, the state of the person who owned the property that's trying to acquire, one of the two members that are representing the state are supportive of selling it to the town today. The second, I guess, is concerned about the distribution of the assets of the estate. So I do think at this point that it's probably a wise idea to at least get try to get the authority, so we can try to get this thing moving, because we are, to Elaine's point, we've got an issue, and I think that we need to try to get this moving as quickly as we can. I don't think it's going to impact the discussion of negotiation significantly that may have passed.
All right, I'm going to change my mind and say, let's have the finance committee vote on this one. So I will move that the finance committee recommend approval of Article 8, the water department request for eminent domain.
Second,
All in favor, Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
David abstain.
Elaine, I.
Jason, I.
Debbie, I.
Eric, I.
6-0-1 with David the abst- Article 9, wastewater department enterprise fund, budget and surplus revenue appropriations. This is the standard vote. I assume wastewater budget. I assume Elaine will be abstaining from it. The total budget is $4,582,455.
I move the finance committee recommend favorable action on Article 9.
I'll second it for discussion. Elaine, I guess I'd like you again to answer any question on this one.
And I'm recusing myself. So
Right. Are you comfortable that the current rate structure will cover this $4,582,000?
the current, no, we have been in analysis for the past 6 months on getting a increasing rates.
Okay.
No, the rates will be increasing.
Okay, that was my question. Anybody else have anything? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
6-0-1.
Hey Keith, can I make a really nitpicky point? See the insurance line? We don't have a comma there.
In the 43,000.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Missed that one.
There's another.
So it's a thing, grading papers all day, teachers are gonna look.
Number 3 on 35 page, exact periods.
The revolving,
There's also not a line.
Article 11 is the standard revolving fund article.
Do we need to do 10
That's
on the bottom of the
Oh, I
list?
skipped 10.
10.
Okay, yeah, the Renewable Energy Enterprise Fund. This is the standard $500,000 that flows into the account and out of the account. Yes, Keith?
Sorry. So recreation tax was $750. Say 500.
No, with the, I run ahead. I'm going back
I
to,
apologize.
yeah, Article 10.
Oh, you're right.
Article 10 is the Renewable Energy Enterprise Fund balance, where 500,000 gets appropriated so that we can pay the electric bills, and then the revenue comes in to, and if we're fortunate, we end up with $1 or $2 extra in there as revenue.
Move the finance committee recommend approval of Article 10.
Second,
All in favor, Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Elaine, I.
Jason, I.
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
7-0-0 recommendation, Article 10. Article 11, the revolving funds. This is the standard article which authorizes these amounts The significant item here is that the recreation department is increasing their fund from 500,000 to 750,000 to quote, accommodate increased programs offered by the recreation department. So much for level services.
And again, we don't have oversight over that.
Right, that's why, I'm probably gonna vote against it.
I mean, that's kind of an ongoing concern I've had for a while. Account.
I'll make a motion to vote favorable for Article 11.
You wanna do the whole thing with the projects and the budget?
Let's do the individual revolving funds.
Oh, yay.
Recreation, 750,000.
Second.
All in favor?
I'm gonna say, well, go ahead. I know we have an order, I forget.
Anybody in favor? All
Derek,
opposed?
aye.
I'd actually like to know what the difference of the 250 is. I mean, I don't want to just go ahead and say no without some,
Not enough information.
yeah, that would be mine.
Okay,
That's
so
all,
you
just-
you'd like to defer this,
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, what's the deal with the oversight? I mean, we have no oversight over that account. I mean, that's my biggest thing.
Understood. I mean, the revolving fund in general.
So I mean, but what I'm saying is we're gonna have $750,000 flowing in and out of this account with no oversight from us. Not to mention, like, where's the money going? Is every dollar going in, being paid back out? Is any of that going to the maintenance of the building?
Sure.
Like,
I can get
where's
you,
the money going?
so I can get you a breakdown of where the expenses are going. It goes to the maintenance of buildings. It goes to the maintenance of fields, or sharing the maintenance of fields. It goes to paying, staff members for the programs that they offer. But I'm happy to provide the things on with a detailed list of anticipated expenses that total that $750,000. You at least know where it's going.
Cool.
all right. Article 10, establish a Board of Health revolving fund. 12. Article 12, getting late. Establish a Board of Health revolving fund. The Board of Health is looking to establish a revolving fund with $10,000 limit in order to run some paid classes.
I can speak to this.
Okay, good.
I talked to Joyce when I did the budget, and what she did this year, which was very, very good. She hosted and ran safe certifications for local businesses. That, if you go outside, is typically a couple of $100 per business to get certified. She did it for $85. She did it for the cost of books. And she mentioned this was really the driving focus of having this revolving fund is she gets the local businesses, trains them, teaches them, they take the test for a minimal amount compared to what they would have to pay anyway. So that's the law. That's at least part of the logic behind this. So I'll make a motion to recommend favorable action for Article 12.
Second.
All in favor?
Jason,
Derek,
aye.
aye.
Elaine, I.
Debbie,
All- All opposed? Kyle, aye.
David, I.
I'm gonna abstain from it.
So we have 4, 2, 1. Correct?
Yep.
Article 13, transfer to employment liability reserve fund. You probably remember we created this fund a few years ago to have, in effect, a liability account waiting to pay off people who leave with a ton of vacation money owed to them. Yes, sick too. And so where this article authorizes an increase from 100,000 to 150,000. And it uses free cash to fund the 150,000.
If I may,
Yes.
is this are you aware of any retirements coming up that this is specifically earmarked for? Or is it just 150 is a good number?
So we've got some retirements that we're aware of, some long-term employees that will be expensive because they're eligible for the sick leave buyout.
So this 150, it's not like I can say, oh, let's amend it to 100. It's what you need to.
Carol?
Yeah, it's what we're gonna need.
Okay.
Can I ask a question on this from a budgeting standpoint? Why is the, I guess, vacation time and sick time not built into the budget for these individuals and then banked as a liability going forward?
We kind of bank it with this fund. That's how it's done.
But it's not
Not really
reflected in the
operating.
but it's not reflected in department budgets, I guess
No.
is my confusion there.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
Make a motion, favorable actions for Article 13.
Second,
All in favor? Carl, I.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Elaine, I.
Jason,
You know, I'm sorry, just had a question. When I look at, like streets, trees and weed cards, it does have longevity cards.
that's different.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
is it?
Different.
yeah.
Okay, then Debbie,
Derek, I.
Longevity is just still employed.
Recommend approval,
Oh.
700.
but it has sick leave buyout on here too.
Some unions get it by the year, like they can cash out a certain amount of vacation days per year,
Oh,
or sick days, right?
Article 14, transfer it to OPEB, Health Insurance Liability Fund. This is the one where we're trying to build up a reserve fund to cover the 40 or $50 million obligation that the town has for retiree medical insurance. It's the one that Kyle Pike talks about every year, that it'll bankrupt the town eventually if we don't consider doing away with retiree medical insurance like the rest of the world has done. Municipalities don't seem to want to work with the rest of the world and then wonder why we have tax problems such as we discussed with the schools. Little editorial comment there, I'm sure you all appreciate. We are recommending that we put $100,000 in there from free cash. On an annual basis, some years we put 50,000 in, some years we put 100,000 in. The last I remember, the balance was probably 600,000 maybe,
Yeah.
910.
Yeah.
Moving along. Any questions?
Nope.
The finance committee recommend favorable action on Article 14.
Second,
All in favor, Carl, I.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Elaine, I.
Jason,
Debbie,
Derek, I.
700, recommend approval. Article 15, transfer to the stabilization fund. The same type of thing as we have for the OPEB fund, recommending a free cash funding of $100,000, which will get us to a balance of $3,237,000. Any questions? But we'll wait until David comes back.
I'm here. Go ahead.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
You made a motion?
No.
I'll make a motion to support favorable action for the transfer stabilization fund, Article 15.
Second,
All in favor, Carl, I.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Elaine, I.
Jason,
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
Vote in favor of recommendation 700. Transfer to capital stabilization fund, Article 16. We talked briefly about the capital stabilization fund earlier. This is asking to fund another 100,000 into that stabilization fund. Again, I said before, you see the balance there of 773K, add 100, take away 746, so it'll be 127. And then when we put 400,000 in over the next year, it goes back up to 527,000. The 400,000, my guesstimate coming from the meals tax.
We're taking 750 back out again after that.
Yes,
Okay.
that's why I say stabilization is a misnomer.
I'll make favorable action for Article 16.
Second.
All in favor, Kyle,
I
aye.
think it was Article
No,
17.
16.
16.
Oh, is it 16? All right, so.
Okay.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Elaine, aye.
Jason,
Debbie, aye.
Derek, I.
Finance Committee recommends approval of Article 16, 700. Article 17, transfer to municipal building insurance fund. This was a fund that we just set up last year, didn't we? Think to.
No, we've had this for many, many years. We've just started using it.
Okay. So we funded it last year. Maybe that's what we did. All right, so we now have a balance in that of $31,395.10. And we want to add $10,000 to it.
Did someone explain this to me? Because the description of paying a proper charge for effective fire insurance on municipal buildings. I don't know what this purpose is.
I think it was
It's
supposed
mostly the
to.
deductibles. Did you hear?
So it's
Okay.
anticipated deductibles for any insurance claims?
Correct.
What's our typical insurance deductibles?
5,000.
So we're gonna have 40,000 in there, that it would be what? Maybe not, was it eight claims a year?
But you also use this fund to pay for any repairs in anticipation of being reimbursed as well.
Is that the intent?
It should be to cover, I don't want to speak for Carol, but that's what other municipalities would use this fund for, is to cover deductibles and to have any working capital. So if you have a car crash, and it's covered by insurance, but you've got to pay out of pocket for the claim and then get reimbursed, you need to have a fund available to pay those.
That makes sense if that's the language in this.
Yeah, I
Fund.
don't want to speak. Sorry.
That is correct. Thank you, Mary.
And move favorable action for Article 17.
Second.
All in favor, Kyle, aye.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Elaine, aye.
Jason, I.
Debbie, aye.
Derek, I.
Finance Committee recommends approval 700. Opioid mitigation. Carol, explain this article in simple
Okay.
language,
Sure.
please.
So at the fall town meeting, prior to any established guidance from the DOR, we set up a opioid settlement stabilization fund. And in that fund, we transferred the funds that we had received in settlement from from Massachusetts to the tune of, I think it was something like $50,000 last year. So 40,000 of it was voted as an article, and the rest is sitting in, the 11,000 is sitting in the stabilization fund. Since then, we've gotten established guidance from the DOR, and they said that we can set up a special revenue fund. And what that frees us up to do is with a stabilization fund, you need a 2/3 vote in order to use any money from town meeting. With a special revenue fund, it can be spent in accordance with the settlement litigation documents for anything that those documents recommend spending on without having appropriation at town meeting. So it frees up the money in order to use it.
Okay, I'm never enthusiastic about freeing up money that doesn't have to be voted by town meeting. So, you know, this one doesn't particularly excite me on doing it this way.
Well,
I went to the conference last week and listened to DOR. They're recommending that all municipalities move all of their opioid funding into a special revenue account. And they didn't give us guidance until just recently, nor did they give us the ability. But when the governor signed the supplemental budget bill recently, this language was included in the supplemental budget bill a couple of, 8 weeks ago, I think, Carol, 6 to 8 weeks ago, giving communities the authorization to do this. So all this article is doing is saying, can we close out the stabilization account, move it into the special revenue account where it's supposed to be?
But
Thank you,
once
Mary.
but once it's in there, the selectmen can just vote to spend it.
So there's restricted uses on how you can use this, and they're very detailed. And I can tell you that I just went to a meeting with a bunch of Plymouth County folks last week, and I raised the issue about opioid settlement monies and asked, what are other communities doing? Because we're all poised to receive hundreds of thousands of dollars from these settlements, and trying to find a need that fits into the eligible criteria is somewhat difficult, and people are having trouble trying to even utilize these funds. So they're just sitting in these special revenue accounts. So the request was of the Plymouth County Commissioners to take a look holistically at the county and see what needs there exist at the county and whether communities can partner with the county to utilize these opioid settlement funds to address the problem countywide. So yeah, it does move it to a special revenue fund. It does not require town meeting authorization, but the uses of it are very, very limited. No, ARPA's broad. You can use ARPA for anything.
Make a motion, favorable action, Article 18.
Second,
All in favor?
Michael, I.
David, I.
Elaine, I.
Jason,
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
All opposed? Kyle, aye. 610 on Article 18. Capital equipment project funding, we probably want to defer this one that Keith Emberg is offered to give us a discussion on this along, I'm sure Mike can help too. The only thing I will note is that we buying 4 new trucks for $1.1 million, and that the total is $2,227,000. But we'll defer that until probably the 17th meeting. Article 20. This one I asked, I would just assume defer this one because there are a couple of fairly significant dollars in there that we might want to get a little more information from.
I agree with that.
62,500 for a compliance permit, $40,000 to paint the hallways at the school, 33,000 to take down some trees near the Adams Center. I must admit, this article has always been used for things like this, but I'm not sure I've ever seen it used to this degree. $200,000 plus.
238,
38.
with 80 of it coming from free cash.
Is that because we had this gigantic unexpended article from a couple years ago? Is that what's driving that?
Yeah, that's part of my question. What was that $125,000 matching grant that's going back?
I'd like to speak to that. So
Certainly.
a few years ago, the conservation got at town meeting $260,000 for our grant matching fund. It turns out that he got full grant for the project that he needed. So we had this money sitting there. At last year's town meeting, we closed out 100,000 of it. And at this town meeting, we're using 35,000 in Article 2, I think it is, and the 125,000 in this article.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will defer Article 20 until our next meeting. Article 21, Sampson Fund appropriations. This is a standard article. We have this $1 million plus Elizabeth B. Sampson Trust Fund, where we can use it to do projects like the National Police Night Out, Memorial Day Parade. I see we do have a couple of new ones here this year. ADA Accessible Door Project and an Accessible Nature Trail by the Conservation Committee. Does anybody want to question any of these or get more information, or are you willing to vote it?
Move the finance committee recommend favorable action on Article 21.
Second,
All in favor? Kyle, aye.
Michael, I.
David, I.
and I,
Jason,
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
700, recommend approval. Article 22, Community Preservation Committee. Do we want to defer this to get a bit more information? There is a website on the town system where we on this CPC committee have all the information that you ever could want to look at on the projects.
Have they not voted yet?
Yes, they have voted.
Yeah.
And it would happen to be a meeting that I thought it was more important that I go to the school committee meeting, so I
good call.
attend.
Very.
I'd be interested in hearing about the projects.
Yeah, like what?
Okay, we'll defer that. Article 23, this is really our article, so this should be straightforward. We voted it at our last meeting, 3.8% increases for the treasurer, collector, and the town clerk, and the standard $1,800 stipends for all of our glorious elected officials.
Move the finance committee recommend favorable action on Article 23.
Second.
Again.
All in favor? Aye, Kyle.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Recuse myself.
Jason, I.
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
601. Recommend approval. Article 24, wage and personnel bylaw. Since we don't have anything on that one yet, we will defer that one. Article 25, Council on Aging Needs Assessment for Age Dementia Friendly.
You know this one? You know this one?
No, I don't. I don't know. I can't remember.
35 grand, so
Bad, David, bad, David. Council on Aging Advisory Board is looking for $35,000 from free cash to do a needs assessment survey for all of us residents over 55 years of age. Any comments or questions? This is one where I would just as soon save $35,000.
I tend to agree with you, Mr. Chairman.
That's just my opinion.
I think I would be.
You just don't want more mail. That's what it is.
Have we got
I need the
any kind of
assessment.
presentation on this, or is this, no?
Needs assessment will be conducted in order to inform our community of the issues facing residents, optimizing opportunities for health, participation, and security. Well, stop taxing me so damn much, and I'll be better off.
And you have the privilege to be able to say that. As you-
Right.
I believe you fall in the category of over
Yes.
55.
Yeah, I just made
I
it.
just have a question. Is there any better? Is there any grant opportunity or becoming an accredited dementia-friendly community? I'd like to hear from the town agent director on that.
All right, we'll defer this article and
Good call.
get her to speak to us or get some information. Increased property tax exemption for seniors and veterans. Doesn't say you have to be poor to get this.
You don't, you just need to, senior, it's an income level, veterans, it's, disability related.
What's considered a senior?
65 or older, and there's an income threshold that you have to be below.
No, you're saying no income threshold.
I don't think there's any.
There is an income threshold that you have to be below a certain amount. Every town is different depending on how they implemented it, but it's like $25,000. It's all, yeah, it's poverty level. For the average. I'll make, motion favorable action for Article 26.
Second,
All in favor, Kyle, aye.
Debbie, I.
Jason, I.
Elaine, I.
Michael, I.
All opposed?
Oh, Derek, I, sorry.
Opposed or in favor?
In favor.
601, David abstaining.
Mr. Chairman,
Kind of jumped the gun on it.
Yes,
this is regarding the work off program.
Yeah,
It's not just
Oh.
the exemption.
yeah.
Okay,
Then that would probably be, okay, work off.
Carol, how many people utilize this currently?
that I don't know.
That's
The
the reason for my
assessor does, yeah.
abstaining. I wanted to see what
from when I,
actual impact will be.
from when I was treasurer, I'd say order of magnitude 20 maybe.
Okay, so not.
Do we know what we're paying for an hourly rate on this?
Middle, I believe it's middle wage.
Is it really? Okay. It doesn't have to be.
What's it doing?
Yeah.
Article 27, rescission of borrowing authorization. The town meeting authorized us to borrow $442,963 to build a storage building. That was when we were talking about getting rid of the Maple Street Fire Station. But we do a good job of making it so difficult for anybody to develop anything over there. Looks like we'll hold on to it, and so we don't need the storage building. Correct, Mr.?
We need,
No.
so I would suggest we need the storage building, where we found out the bid, the estimates we had been given of 442,000 were nowhere near what we needed. So rather than come back and ask for additional funds for a storage shed, I felt we could just hold on.
Move the finance committee recommend favorable action on Article 27.
Second,
All in favor? Kyle, aye.
Michael, I.
David, I.
Elaine, I.
Jason, I.
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
700, recommend approval. Waterways Improvement Funds appropriation. We all know that the Waterways Improvement Fund is where the voting fees go. There's currently $128,000 balance. 35,000 was transferred in FY '24. And now they want to transfer another 25,000 to be used for unforeseen expenses to maintain, dredge, clean, and improve harbors, et cetera.
Hey, Keith, in the fourth line of that motion, there's an and that I think is supposed to be in.
Yes. And for thereof in enforcement.
Make a motion, favorable action, Article 28.
Second.
All in favor? Carl, I.
Michael,
David, I.
Elaine, I.
Debbie, I.
Derek, I.
700 recommend approval. Adopt changes to general bylaws. Does anybody think that finance committee needs to vote this?
I don't think so.
Considering I don't understand what it means, I'm gonna say,
Oh, it's the town clerks.
This is, yeah, we got an email on this the other day.
we defer these, move on with our evening.
Do you want to-
it's more the description of it that to me isn't, I mean, I know he's with his codification and all that, but the article would provide all of Kingston's general bylaws. It includes all bylaw changes previously approved by town meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's similar how you said that in.
Yeah, we'll defer it till next time.
Article 30, renumber general bylaws. Both are not applicable, I said. I tend to think this is not applicable for the finance committee.
I agree.
I would agree with that.
All right.
I'm thinking anything to do with imposing a uniform system of capitalization is probably somebody else's problem.
Amendment to the animal control bylaw. I say that's not applicable. Anybody disagree? Article 32, designate authorized officer to negotiate and execute solar pilot agreements. This is giving the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Assessors, and the town administrator a certain authority. Again, I don't feel this is applicable to the finance. Committee. Anybody
Agreed.
Disagree.
Let's move on.
You okay, Elaine, if we say that it's not applicable to us?
Yeah, I mean,
And approve and authorize, Article 33, approve and authorize the acquisition of easements. Again, I don't believe this has anything to do with the finance committee.
I agree.
I'll recuse myself on the
Conversation. I'm good with that.
Sleet, wind. Bad day.
Article 34, I don't believe is applicable to us.
I agree.
All right, then we've done our first pass through the town meeting warrant. We've got a couple of the big ones left to do. I will summarize, send an email into Keith and Carol and whoever else who is seeking information from.
Just a question, is an article still needed for chapter 90 funds? No more? Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Hold on just a minute.
I second
Move
it.
the
I second
question.
it.
There you go. Move the question.
The only thing I really want to say is if we need a meeting April 10th, a week from now, I tend to think that we're okay to just hold our April 17th meeting. The fact that the warrant doesn't close until the 23rd, we meet with the selectmen the 23rd. Correct, correct,
How about the ninth? We're still on for the ninth, is the ninth?
that's all.
No.
The 9th is a Tuesday. Oh, you mean May?
There's a new schedule, for things like, that's why I'm mentioning it.
Right.
April 23rd for closing the warrant, April 23rd, FinCom selecting meeting. May 11th, town meeting. May 18th, still town election. So unless anybody here thinks that we have a lot more to do, I think that April 17th is probably good for the next meeting.
Are you gonna need anybody from the school department on the 17th? And the only reason I'm bringing it up is that is school vacation week. If you needed anybody from the school committee.
Yeah, I won't be here.
And to that, what's the next steps from here? Because I mean, we, aren't comfortable with the budgets as they exist today. Is there gonna be work done? And
On the school budgets?
just generally speaking, I mean,
On the school budgets, I think it's pretty straightforward. I can't imagine getting any changes from the local school committee.
Okay.
They were pretty strong last night in voting that budget. Silver Lake is meeting Thursday night, tomorrow night. Now, I intend to bring up the fact, one of the reasons I was trying to get a feel, I intend to bring up the fact that the finance committee is leaning towards not supporting school budgets, which will open up the question, is Silver Lake willing to consider looking at any budget adjustments for our assessment purposes? I suspect that they may not, but at the meeting back March 14th, they specifically said that depending upon what the three towns did, their required or their suggested reductions, they might have to go back and take a relook at their budget.
and now knowing the impact of the schools, do we want to relook at the general government, Kingston's town government? Because we've approved departments individually, making comments along the way with statements or understanding that depending what the school budgets came in, that may or may not be revisited.
I certainly think that's a good agenda item for our next meeting. However, I can say from my point of view that if there's a 10% increase in school budgets, I'm probably not going to personally vote for any reductions in any other budgets that are 4.5% or thereabouts. Now, I might be convinced to say that I wasn't going to recommend any of the budgets. I don't know how that works since we've already approved, recommended approval of budgets.
Well, I mean, that's why I bring up the fact that we have been saying consistently all
Yep.
along that we may have to revisit to get to 3.5%, even though 3 was the target. So I'm just throwing it out there too, because
Yeah. And I hear you, and
I'm with Elaine on that.
you would, to get to 3.5% on,
I don't know about the percentage, but.
yeah, okay, so I was gonna say, to me, to get to 3.5%, when we've got a $3 million increase in the schools, I think we would probably have to go negative.
Yeah,
So the
no, I'm not
town-
saying that.
Now, if we wanted to make a point and say, okay, we're going to cut every town budget back to, say, 3.5%. That's something that you could talk about.
because I'm following up on my statement the last meeting that, consistently now budgets are increasing 5%. And just forget the school budget. A 5% increase every year isn't sustainable for town government. And again, without growth, without revenue, nothing's sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too sidetracked here, but I mean, I'm just looking at the bottom line number
Right.
of free cash coming out. Like, at the end of the day, what are we at for free cash? Right, and like, right now, we're projecting 1 million. Not enough. It's not enough in my opinion.
Okay.
So, you know, we need to find money. There's
Well,
gotta be
and-
cut somewhere, do something, because that free
Well,
cash,
but
in my
no,
opinion.
but the way you're gonna find free cash is rejecting some of these articles that we just approved that are being funded by free cash. Okay, or we've got the capital plan, a big one. So if we were to say, hey, we recommend reducing capital expenditures by $300,000, that goes back into free cash. But if we're going to suggest reducing the police budget or the fire budget, that's not going to affect free cash.
I don't want any limitations.
Yep.
But all I'm saying is I'd like, you know, to be more towards 1.5 million than 1 million. However we get there, but I don't want anything off the table.
That's will be one of our agenda items to look at the balance of free cash. And the only way the finance committee can have any impact on free cash is by not approving certain free cash expenditures. Articles.
Yeah, because, okay, so I go back to the leases, 750,000 in leases, even if half of it comes from, 400,000 come from meals tax, the balance is still coming from free cash. So if we reduce, not all,
It's not. It's all coming from the stabilization fund, but a balance larger than 400,000 there, so it's enabling the entire $700,000 lease amount to come from the stabilization account. Not any free cash is being used for leases. Nothing.
okay, I'm making an illustration.
Sure.
If we only have a million in free cash and the leases of 750,000 coming from the capitalization fund, whatever, the end of the day, $750,000, 400 of it is coming from meals tax. The other difference, that stabilization fund, if I'm understanding this correctly, is going to be drawn down to 100,000 after the leases are paid for. You're putting the 700.
Before the $400,000 goes back in.
Right, so we're still at a deficit for paying $750,000. 750,000 worth of leases, and 400's going back in.
Oh, that's not.
The leases are.
It's
Yeah,
tough
we
to
know
see.
this,
It's-
man.
It's tough to see, and we've got a spreadsheet that we can share with the FinCom if they'd like to see it. But
That would be great.
it shows the activity in capital stabilization.
That would be
There you
great.
go.
I still can't read it.
We'll get a copy of it.
All right, so I think we know that for our next meeting, we have several or few warrant articles to still do. We want to talk in general about what we're going to recommend as the final budget to go to town meeting. We will look at the free cash funding items to see if there's anything that we want to revisit concerning the use of free cash or our recommendations concerning the use of free cash. And getting ready for our meeting with the selectmen on mainly the budget.
And right, and since you took a poll on whether or not supporting the school budget or not, I'm not asking for the same thing for general fund budget. But I can't say right now, I can't support the percentage of increase for the general fund budget,
And I,
which is upwards of 5%.
I think I just said that I can support the 5% with the idea that it's much better than the 10% for schools. So with that, my meetings are never supposed to go more than 2 hours. So I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second,
Second, third, fourth.
All in favor?
Aye.
Michael.
Aye.